Australia's most ambitious green hydrogen mega projects worth billions of dollars are being cancelled, paused, or quietly dismantled. And they're all seemingly failing for the same reasons. But it's not the one that you've likely been told. My name is Richard, and welcome to Ron's Industries. Today, in the energy industry, we're taking a closer look at green hydrogen and why Australia's biggest projects are suddenly falling apart. In the last year alone, at least 5 major green hydrogen projects from Fortescue's Gladstone electrolyser, Origin and Orica's joint Hunter Valley project, BP choosing not to proceed with its renewable energy hub in the Pilbara, Woodside simply withdrawing its Tasmanian project at the environmental application stage, and the Central Queensland, or CQH2, losing support. These projects have either been cancelled, paused, or indefinitely postponed, with Origin even go as far as being quoted that it intends to cease work on all hydrogen development opportunities. Now that's a pretty serious statement, considering that we're talking about projects ranging from between $207 million all the way up to $12.5 billion, such as the Central Queensland project, when it was cancelled when the government withdrew its support from the project. So what are the official reasons? Lack of demand or market uncertainty, as stated by Origin and Orica, cost concerns from Fortescue, as well as other factors such as input cost risks, engineering challenges, a lack of cheap power, and of course, waiting for government subsidies. But here's the thing. When this many high-value projects collapse within the same 6 to 12-month time period, that's not bad luck. That's a systematic problem. So that raises the question, what's really going wrong? It almost looks like all of these companies arrived at the same uncomfortable conclusion at the same time, or just that they all copied each other's homework during the planning stages. And that conclusion looks to be that green hydrogen, as it exists today, doesn't make commercial sense. And we're going to take a deeper look into why very shortly. But has it been something that's just been discovered, or has there been a problem baked into the idea all along? To understand why these projects are getting sidelined, we need to understand what green hydrogen actually is, and more importantly, what it isn't. Now, hydrogen is absolutely everywhere, but you can't dig it up or just tap it like oil and gas. Hydrogen is always bonded to something else, and that's just part of its chemistry. Coal, natural gas, water, hydrogen has to be extracted, not harvested. And this is where the different hydrogen processes come in. Brown, grey, blue hydrogen all depend on fossil fuels, normally as a feedstock or an input, kind of like this thing called fuel. Now, green hydrogen is the only process that uses renewable electricity to pull hydrogen from treated and then prepared water using a process called electrolysis. So yeah, green hydrogen is renewable since it doesn't demand a fuel as an input, but only in theory. But that's only half the picture. You see, in practice, it's a manufactured fuel that relies, scratch that, demands by its very namesake and definition entirely on massive amounts of clean and cheap energy to even exist. And in some ways, this is where the problem with green hydrogen starts to build up and starts to compound. Think of it like this. The process that gets the hydrogen from the water needs energy. Now, what provides that energy? Coal, natural gas, nuclear, or are we talking about solar and wind? So let's break down the numbers, because this is where the story really starts to unravel. According to some of the available numbers, a 300 megawatt electrolyzer producing about 170 tons of hydrogen per day results in what I assume is the production cost of around about $5.40 per kilo. Now, that sounds cheap, right? Not exactly. Now, it should be said that the same $5.40, which is assumed to be the energy cost in this case, actually works out to be around about $918,000 per day, or $127.50 per megawatt hour. Or if you're the person who gets your electricity bill, works out to around about 12.8 cents per kilowatt hour, which then works out to be around about half the peak usage price, which on my last bill was around about 22 cents. Now that would likely mean that the cost of hydrogen to the consumer would be around about, I'm guessing, twice the price presented at close to $11 per kilo, or likely even higher. But here's the catch. That single kilo of hydrogen takes up around about 166 liters of space as a gas. And that's before we take into account potentially things such as cooling or compression. Meanwhile, the same amount of energy in gasoline fits into just 4.3 liters. And at current prices, that would be equivalent to around about anywhere between $6.90 and $9.50 at the time of putting the analysis together, and also the time of recording, which, for full disclosure, haven't been the same time. So this means that hydrogen is technically cheaper by weight, but hydrogen is pretty much worthless by volume. And that volume problem destroys the logistics behind it, and in many ways, the entire usability of hydrogen as a fuel in the first place. So this is where we get to the real problem. It's not necessarily the hydrogen itself, but the power. Now, there's critics that are going to say the issue is all to do with demand, or that we need more subsidies, or that we don't need to worry about it. The industry is going to mature eventually. But the truth is much simpler. The green hydrogen is limited by the availability of cheap renewable power that the process used to get it just needs to qualify for its own title. A green hydrogen facility doesn't just need electricity, it needs its own 300, 500, or even 1,000 megawatt solar or wind farm just to operate and just to produce. Meanwhile, all of that renewable energy could be simply sent directly to the grid, powering homes and businesses directly without the hydrogen acting as middleman. So this is what the picture is starting to actually look like. Firstly, we build a huge power station just to run a machine to manufacture a fuel that stores far less energy per litre than petrol or diesel. And that energy-hungry infrastructure costs hundreds of millions of dollars before you produce a single gram of hydrogen. So does green hydrogen actually have any future in the energy industry? Here's the ironic part. From an environmental angle and factoring in the initial construction, materials, the people, and all of the industrial factors just for starting up, green hydrogen is the only hydrogen process that actually makes any environmental sense. There, I said it. So unlike coal-based or natural gas-based hydrogen, green hydrogen emits no emissions at all. In fact, the byproduct is just oxygen. If it could be produced cheaply at scale, hydrogen absolutely has its place in the energy sector. But right now, the economics don't seem to be stacking up. Not for the producers, not for the industry, and not for the energy grid supporting it. Hydrogen as a fuel of the future, I can't see it. And I can't see the consumer adopting it, even if it gets off the ground. And that's kind of where we get to the whole ammonia option. When hydrogen is discussed, ammonia is always close behind it, or usually in the same conversation. And for good reason. Gaseous hydrogen at high pressure of up to 700 bar or 700 atmospheres only contains around about 62.9 grams of hydrogen per litre. And as far as packaging goes, that's getting closer to what I think is probably the upper limit for the technology, such as the gas bottles and the materials used to contain that sort of pressure. So what might be surprising is that water actually has more hydrogen in it than a litre of high pressure hydrogen at 111 grams per kilo. Octane, think of your gasoline or petrol, comes in next at around about 158 grams per kilogram, and then ammonia packs 177 grams of hydrogen per kilo. By far the best industrial choice, with the exception of something such as natural gas or methane, which brings in a proportionally massive amount of 251 grams per kilo, which makes it an obvious choice for other hydrogen processes like grey or blue hydrogen, which are basically just fancy industrial processes for natural gas without any of the carbon guilt by the end customer, or just simply burying the carbon before shipping out the hydrogen on the other end of the line. Now, that being said, ammonia is the next best producible option. But ammonia has requirements, and sadly, there's even more irony here, such as to produce ammonia, the industrial processes are usually going to require high pressure and high temperatures to make the chemical processing work. And often, ironically, natural gas is going to be part of that process. So we end up with 3 industrial processes just to get one fuel. And while ammonia stores hydrogen better, it adds even more complexity, more cost, and even more risk and more things that can go wrong to the entire process. So here's the final takeaway. Hydrogen technically can be a powerful fuel, but getting it, storing it, transporting it, and powering it is where the challenges live. And I think that's why these billion-dollar Australian projects are being shelved. Green hydrogen isn't failing because there's something wrong with hydrogen. It's failing because we're trying to create a new fuel that only makes sense when the energy powering it is clean, cheap, abundant, and above all else, dedicated to the entire process on its own. And right now, Australia simply doesn't have enough cheap, renewable, or dense enough energy to make that a reality. And the energy that we do have is getting more expensive. So if you found this breakdown useful, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Does green hydrogen actually have a future, or is it destined to be another failure? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.